Mistress's fake pregnancy exposed. Millionaire abandons her, begs pregnant wife for a second chance. In a city where fortunes are made and lost by the hour, one couple's blissful life is shaken to its core by scandal, deceit, and the darkest secrets imaginable. Meet Ethan Harrison, the charismatic millionaire admired by colleagues, neighbors, and friends, but who hides a silent ache beneath his flawless public image. Married to the warm-hearted Charlotte, he seems destined for fatherhood and everlasting love, until the seductive Camilla Brooks ensnares him in a web of lies. When Camilla claims to be pregnant with Ethan's child, it threatens not only their marriage but also the very foundation of trust, loyalty, and hope. Ethan Harrison was a name well known across Redwood City's social and corporate circles. For the better part of a decade, he had built his empire, Harrison Global Ventures, with sweat, intellect, and tireless ambition. Expansive real estate projects, lucrative mergers, and significant philanthropic endeavors earned him a standing invitation to elite galas and charity dinners. Even the Redwood Gazette frequently ran stories on his latest successes. But behind every beaming press photo, Ethan carried an invisible weight, an unspoken fear that this polished success might one day crack and reveal the flawed man beneath. Yet to the world, his life appeared near perfect. He was married to Charlotte Green Harrison, a soft-spoken interior designer who brought warmth to even the coldest of spaces. With her discerning eye for color schemes and her ability to transform a room into a sanctuary, Charlotte's design firm thrived in Redwood City's competitive market. Beyond her work, Charlotte was the calming balm to Ethan's ceaseless energy. Where he could be restless, she was gentle. Where he was impulsive, she was methodical. They embodied a partnership that many friends, especially Charlotte's confidant, Sarah Patterson, considered unbreakable. When Charlotte and Ethan wed 6 years earlier, they promised each other a life of honesty, respect, and unwavering devotion. Their wedding photos, taken at the sprawling Redwood Country Club, showed them beaming under a canopy of white roses, their hands entwined as if no force on earth could tear them apart. Over time, they purchased a stately home in an upscale neighborhood, complete with a manicured lawn, a grand foyer, and ample space for the children they hoped to have one day. For Charlotte, motherhood was a long-cherished dream. She had lost her own younger brother to a sudden illness in her teens, and that tragedy shaped her tender heart. She yearned for a family where love could flourish and overshadow the tragedies of the past. Whenever she and Ethan discussed starting a family, his eyes lit up, at least in the beginning. But as the years wore on and Ethan's business expanded, his energy seemed drained by endless deals, board meetings, and the lavish events that required his attendance. Still, if anyone had asked Charlotte about their marriage, she would have answered with unwavering confidence that theirs was a bond meant to last. She reveled in memories of late-night strolls through Redwood Park, with Ethan pointing out constellations in the sky, or the affectionate notes he'd leave by her coffee mug in the morning. Yes, sometimes he came home late without an explanation, looking haunted by some unspoken worry. Sometimes his phone buzzed with messages he would quickly silence. But Charlotte trusted him implicitly, imagining these were the burdens of a CEO under constant stress. It wasn't until a particular charity gala at the Redwood Club that the first splinter would appear in their beautiful facade. Charlotte had played a significant role in organizing the event, from choosing the linens to coordinating the hors d'oeuvres and entertainment. The night bustled with Redwood City's elite, Councilman Richard Grayson, the philanthropic Whitfield family, and even local celebrities. Camera flashes lit the corridor like a strobe effect each time Ethan posed for pictures, his arm around Charlotte's waist. Yet amid the laughter and clinking champagne glasses, Charlotte noticed Ethan's gaze drifting across the room. His normally engaging demeanor seemed fixated on someone by the bar, a dark-haired woman in a sleek, emerald dress. The woman returned Ethan's look with a knowing smirk. The air around them crackled with an electricity Charlotte couldn't ignore. With a polite excuse to the donors she'd been conversing with, she trailed after Ethan, only to find him quietly introducing this enigmatic newcomer as Camilla Brooks, an employee at one of Harrison Global's newer international divisions. In that moment, Charlotte's stomach twisted with a foreboding sense that everything was about to change. The gracious smiles exchanged seemed hollow. Under the gilded edges of wealth and prestige, the first deep fissure was forming, threatening the marriage Charlotte cherished more than life itself. In the week following the gala, Charlotte found herself replaying that brief introduction to Camilla Brooks. Why had Ethan's demeanor shifted so drastically the moment that woman appeared? She tried to push the questions aside, telling herself it was merely the stress of hosting such a major event. Yet, at unexpected moments while adjusting fabric swatches for a client or sipping tea in her sunlit living room, Charlotte would feel a pang of unease. She confided her suspicions to Sarah Patterson during one of their regular coffee meetups at the Corner Cafe on Elm Street. The two women had become friends back in college, bonding over a shared love of art history and a dream of traveling through Europe. "He hasn't mentioned her once," Charlotte said softly, stirring her latte. "But the way they looked at each other, I can't get it out of my head." Sarah frowned. "You've been married long enough to know if something's off. Maybe she's just a new associate." She tried to comfort Charlotte, but Sarah's eyes betrayed her concern. "But if it's bothering you, talk to him. Secrets fester if left in the dark." Later that night, Charlotte attempted to bring up the topic as she and Ethan cleared the dining table. "I was just thinking about the gala," she began, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "That woman, Camilla, seemed interesting. How long has she been working at Harrison Global?" Ethan paused, a flicker of tension crossing his face. "Camilla Brooks? Not long. She's helping manage some overseas partnerships. Very bright, a bit unorthodox, but results-driven." "Why do you ask?" Charlotte shrugged, forcing a casual tone. "No reason, just curious. I don't recall seeing her name come up before." He gave her a quick peck on the cheek, offering a half-smile. "I'm sorry. So many new hires, my head spins sometimes." Then he busied himself with the plates, effectively closing the conversation. Charlotte stood there, sensing he was holding something back. The seed of doubt lodged deeper in her heart. Over the next few days, Ethan grew more restless. He'd pace around the house late at night, stepping onto the balcony to answer phone calls in hushed tones. Once, Charlotte overheard him refer to someone as darling. When confronted, he claimed it was a client from London, a harmless quirk of speech. She let it go, not wanting to nag. But the tension kept mounting like an approaching storm no one could ignore. At the Harrison Global office, Ethan was equally on edge. His longtime friend and business partner, Jacob Hill, noticed the change. They had started the company together in a tiny shared workspace, celebrating each contract signed as if it were a monumental victory. Now, Ethan's stare seemed distant, even during critical investor meetings. "Everything all right, man?" Jacob asked one evening. Ethan nodded, a bit too vigorously. "I'm fine, just dealing with personal stuff," he admitted. Camilla, meanwhile, capitalized on every opportunity to insert herself into Ethan's schedule. She'd drop by with lunch under the guise of going over reports or claim she needed him to sign urgent documents in person. Her captivating presence and sharp wit were undeniably magnetic, and Ethan found himself caught in a vortex of flirtation before he realized how deep he'd gone. He would blame it on stress or the allure of someone who seemed to understand his business anxieties. But deep down, he knew he was walking a dangerous path. One evening, Charlotte prepared a candlelit dinner, hoping to revive the closeness that seemed to be slipping away. She dressed elegantly, even though they were just at home, and set the table with fine china. When Ethan arrived, he seemed both surprised and guilty. Throughout the meal, he spoke in stilted sentences, asking about her latest design project, but offering little about his day. Finally, Charlotte whispered, "You know you can tell me anything, right?" He reached across the table to hold her hand. "I know," he said, his voice quiet, yet neither admitted what weighed on their minds. The rift between them grew even as their fingers interlaced. In that silence, the first real cracks became an undeniable chasm, setting the stage for the storm about to engulf them both. While doubts tormented Charlotte about her husband's faithfulness, life threw her a curveball that shifted her entire perspective. She discovered she was pregnant. For weeks, she had brushed off her fatigue, nausea, and sudden aversions to foods she'd once adored, attributing them to stress. But a near-fainting episode one morning, coupled with her missed cycle, prompted her to schedule a checkup with Dr. Helena Morris. Dr. Morris was a compassionate physician with a calm demeanor, having treated Charlotte for minor ailments since her college days. After running the usual blood tests and listening to Charlotte describe her symptoms, Dr. Morris returned with a warm smile and a confirmation that made Charlotte's head spin. "Congratulations, you're going to be a mother." Tears of joy and disbelief pooled in Charlotte's eyes. She had wanted this for so long. She could practically see the bright future she'd always dreamed of, a cozy nursery in soft pastel tones, evenings reading fairy tales to a sleepy toddler, and an unbreakable bond that might even mend whatever was fracturing her marriage. For a moment, Charlotte forgot all about Camilla Brooks and Ethan's late-night phone calls. The new life growing inside her became a beacon of hope. Before telling Ethan, she called her best friend, Sarah, who let out an ecstatic whoop that echoed through the cafe she was visiting. "Oh my goodness, this is incredible," Sarah exclaimed. "I'm so happy for you. This might be just what you need, something wonderful to bring you and Ethan back together." Charlotte's heart soared with renewed optimism. Maybe this baby was a gift to remind them of their love, the life they built, and what truly mattered. Charlotte decided to share the news with Ethan that evening in a meaningful way. She spent the afternoon preparing a special dinner: roasted rosemary chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and a chocolate mousse that Ethan usually found irresistible. She set the table with flickering candles and a simple bouquet of white lilies, her own favorite flower. Tucked beside Ethan's plate was a tiny gift box containing a small pair of baby booties she had picked up on her drive home. When Ethan walked in, the mouth-watering aroma greeted him before Charlotte did. He paused at the doorway, noticing the romantic setup. "Wow," he murmured, "this is beautiful." He sounded both impressed and apprehensive, as though wondering if this was an apology dinner or an ambush. Charlotte gave him a soft smile. "I just wanted to make this evening special," she replied, leading him to his seat. They made polite conversation over the meal, mostly Charlotte asking about his day, Ethan offering cautious tidbits, but the tension never fully eased. As they finished dessert, she slid the small box toward him. "I have a surprise," she said, voice trembling with both nerves and excitement. Ethan opened the box and lifted the tiny baby shoes in disbelief. His eyes met Charlotte's, and tears threatened to spill. Are we?" he began, his voice catching. Charlotte nodded, her own eyes growing misty. "Yes, I'm pregnant, Ethan." His reaction surprised her. There was a moment of pure joy illuminating his face before something like guilt or fear clouded over. He stood and wrapped his arms around her, whispering, That's incredible." Charlotte felt his heart pounding. She clung to him, hoping this would draw them closer, certain that the life forming inside her could be the turning point they so desperately needed. For the next few days, Charlotte's spirit felt lighter, buoyed by the promise of motherhood. She started a diary to record each new emotion and sketched potential nursery designs when she wasn't working on client projects. She even found the courage to believe that Ethan's distant behavior might fade away as he embraced fatherhood. Little did she know that a more devastating blow lurked on the horizon. Camilla Brooks had no intention of letting Ethan slip back into domestic bliss without a fight. While Charlotte basked in the newfound joy of her pregnancy, Ethan faced an emotional tug-of-war he never dreamed he would experience. On one side, there was the prospect of fatherhood, a dream he once cradled close to his heart, now burning more brightly than ever. On the other side lurked his entanglement with Camilla Brooks, whose allure and cunning kept him shackled to a dangerous secret. The affair had started innocently enough, as business conversations that spilled into after-hours dinners. Camilla was sharp, ambitious, and unabashedly flirtatious. She saw right through Ethan's polished exterior to the restless man within, someone who carried the weight of an entire corporation on his shoulders. In her presence, Ethan found a twisted sense of freedom, unburdened by the expectations of perfect husbandhood. Nights turned into stolen moments at upscale bars, culminating in a lapse of judgment. Ethan couldn't fully excuse. Now that Charlotte was pregnant, Ethan wanted to sever the illicit connection. Each time he looked at his wife, glowing with excitement for their child, his guilt twisted his gut. But Camilla was no fool. She sensed his pullback. Their calls became brief, her messages often ignored. Rather than stepping away gracefully, she doubled down on her hold, appearing at his office unannounced or accidentally showing up at restaurants he frequented. One rainy afternoon, Ethan was lost in paperwork when Camilla slipped into his office. "You missed lunch," she purred, placing a sandwich and a coffee on his desk. He stiffened. "I've been busy," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Camilla, feigning hurt, pulled up a chair. "Is that your way of saying we're over? That these weeks together meant nothing?" She eyed him with a blend of anger and vulnerability, effectively reeling him back in. "You don't get to vanish without an explanation," she pressed. He rubbed his temples, feeling a headache threaten. "Look, I appreciate what we had, but I'm trying to fix things at home. Charlotte." He paused, carefully choosing his words. "Charlotte's pregnant." Camilla's expression flickered with shock, then hardened. She quickly masked any real emotion behind a smirk. "Well," she said, leaning back, "that's surprising. Congratulations." Her tone was laced with something sinister, as though she was already planning her next move. Seeing her reaction, Ethan felt a pulse of regret. He wanted to say more, anything, to smooth the awkwardness, but the words died in his throat. Camilla stood up briskly, picking her handbag off the floor. "Don't worry," she said icily. "I won't cause trouble, if that's what you're worried about." Then, with an inscrutable smile, she left. Ethan exhaled shakily. He told himself it was good she knew. Now, maybe she'd back off. Except a part of him recognized the danger in that smile, a promise that Camilla was not about to fade quietly into the background. Sure enough, the next week was a turbulent one. Camilla began dropping cryptic hints about health problems, sending texts at odd hours claiming she felt faint or had severe headaches. Though Ethan tried to remain distant, her messages carried an undercurrent of desperation. Curiosity and guilt prodded him to respond. What if something was truly wrong? Then came the real bombshell. Camilla showed up at the office late one evening, tears streaking her mascara. Ethan, alone in the after-hours quiet, froze. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't want this any more than you did, but here we are. I'm so scared, Ethan." His world spun. Confusion, panic, and a fierce sense of responsibility clashed inside him. Charlotte was pregnant, and now Camilla too? He wanted to demand proof, to question the timing. But the raw grief on Camilla's face softened his skepticism. She clung to him, sobbing that she'd only just confirmed the news at a women's clinic. Overcome by a sense of obligation twisted by guilt, Ethan found himself murmuring promises. He'd help. He wouldn't abandon her or the child. All the while, an image of Charlotte's soft smile and pregnant belly loomed in his mind, intensifying his horror at the situation. Little did he suspect that Camilla's announcement was built on a bedrock of lies. Nor did he realize that by offering reassurance, he'd set in motion a chain of events that would threaten to tear his world apart and devastate the woman he was truly meant to cherish. Camilla's proclaimed pregnancy sent Ethan's life into a chaotic freefall. By day, he was the smiling CEO, publicly celebrating his wife's pregnancy with quiet excitement. By night, he wrestled with the relentless guilt of his affair and the dread that, if Camilla really carried his child, Charlotte's world would be shattered, torn between honesty and the paralyzing fear of losing everything. He went to extreme lengths to hide his turmoil. Every morning, Charlotte would greet him with a radiant smile, discussing baby names and nursery designs. Ethan forced an answering grin, hoping she wouldn't notice the shadows under his eyes. He dreaded the moment she would sense something was terribly off. The ring of his phone became a constant source of panic. Camilla was unpredictable, texting him about prenatal vitamins one day and threatening emotional breakdowns the next. Ethan found himself depositing money into her account at her request doctor's bills, she claimed. He rationalized it as a necessary measure to keep her stable, to avoid scandal, to buy time until he figured out a plan. However, cracks in Camilla's story soon became evident, even to Ethan's guilt-ridden mind. She sent him photos of ultrasound images with no identifiable names or dates. Her clinic receipts looked suspiciously generic. Yet whenever he started to question her, a wave of tears, accusations, or tales of heartbreak would derail him. He considered confiding in someone, maybe Jacob, his business partner, but shame held him back. How could he admit to such a colossal betrayal? Meanwhile, Charlotte's suspicions about Ethan's behavior escalated. She noticed he flinched whenever his phone vibrated, the abrupt way he would excuse himself from the room to answer messages, his drifting mind even when they were together. Though he assured her he was simply swamped at work, the explanation felt thin, driven by a need to protect the emotional well-being of her unborn child. Charlotte quietly began her own search for answers. One afternoon, she ventured into Ethan's home office while he was out meeting a client. With her heart pounding, she opened his desk drawers, scanning for anything unusual. At first, the mundane papers and office supplies offered no clues. But then she found receipts for expensive jewelry, a necklace and bracelet from a boutique she'd never visited or received a gift from. There was also a dinner bill from a high-end French restaurant on a night Ethan claimed to be working late. The date scrawled on the receipt nearly took her breath away. She remembered that evening vividly. She had been at home, sick with morning sickness, calling Ethan to say she was worried, and he never answered. Tears of betrayal pricked at Charlotte's eyes. Clutching the evidence, she sank into the office chair, her vision blurring. She wanted to confront him immediately, but a protective instinct for her unborn baby told her to stay calm. She needed more information, more certainty, before she blew their world apart. That evening, Charlotte forced herself to act normal. She cooked dinner, asked about his day, and offered minimal conversation about her design projects. Ethan's evasive replies only confirmed her suspicion that something was dreadfully wrong. After he fell asleep, Charlotte tossed and turned, imagining 1,000 worst-case scenarios, none of which compared to the real storm already brewing. And while Charlotte wrestled with heartbreak, Camilla reveled in her perceived triumph. In her downtown condo, she admired the new handbag she'd bought with Ethan's hush money. Lisa Miller, her friend at the women's clinic who'd helped forge documentation, was paid handsomely for her silence. Camilla had played her hand brilliantly, or so she believed. After all, what millionaire family man would risk a scandal by exposing her, especially if he truly believed she carried his child? Thus, the stage was set for an inevitable collision of truths. Camilla grew bolder, Charlotte grew more determined, and Ethan, stranded in a quicksand of deceit, found himself with no clear way out. Only fate's harsh spotlight could force the final reckoning, one that would expose all their secrets to a devastating degree. Charlotte's determination to uncover the truth intensified when she realized how little she knew about Camilla Brooks. She recalled the woman from the gala, strikingly confident, her gaze lingering just a bit too long on Ethan. Charlotte confided in Sarah Patterson yet again, this time with more concrete evidence: the suspicious receipts, the late-night calls, her own heartbreak. Sarah, horrified by the betrayal, insisted that Charlotte had every right to know exactly who Camilla was and what hold she had over Ethan. Late one evening, fueled by sleepless desperation, Charlotte decided to track Ethan's phone through the shared family plan they had set up years ago. She hesitated at first, worried about betraying trust, but rationalized that trust had already been broken. Her jaw dropped when she saw Ethan's location: Redwood Women's Center. He had told her he was stuck in a meeting at the office. Why on earth would he be at a prenatal clinic? Heart-hammering, Charlotte grabbed her car keys. Her mind raced with dreadful possibilities, the most horrifying one being that Ethan was there supporting another woman's pregnancy. Gritting her teeth, she drove to the clinic in silence, trying to steady her trembling hands on the steering wheel. She prayed there was some innocent explanation, though her instincts warned otherwise. When she arrived, the waiting area was nearly empty, except for a receptionist leafing through patient files. Charlotte carefully skirted around the desk, looking for some sign of Ethan. A faint voice, muffled by the walls, led her down a corridor where consultation rooms lined both sides. Through a partially open door, she heard Camilla's unmistakable voice, followed by Ethan's subdued tone. Taking a shaky breath, Charlotte peered inside. What she saw shattered her world. Camilla lay on an exam table, an ultrasound machine set up beside her. Dr. Regina Lyons was conducting the examination, pointing at a grainy image on the monitor. Ethan stood close, eyes glued to the screen, a mix of tension and uncertainty written across his features. Though the lights were dim, there was no mistaking the scene. They were looking for a fetal heartbeat. Charlotte's entire body went cold, her breath caught in her throat. She felt as though she had stumbled into someone else's nightmare. She pressed a hand to her own abdomen, remembering the life growing within her. Tears pricked at her eyes. How could Ethan be here with another woman, at another ultrasound? Her trembling hand pushed the door open further. Instantly, Ethan and Camilla looked up. Camilla's eyes flashed with something close to triumph, while Ethan's face drained of color. The doctor paused, confused by the sudden intrusion. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Charlotte's voice emerged, strangled with despair. "Ethan, what is going on?" Tears glistened on her cheeks, but her expression was fierce. Camilla sat up on the exam table, touching her belly as though seeking sympathy. Ethan attempted to speak, but no words came. Camilla softly said, "Charlotte, I'm sorry you found out this way, but I'm pregnant." An unbearable silence filled the room, broken only by the quiet hum of the ultrasound machine. Charlotte's heart pounded like a war drum. She had suspected an affair, but the undeniable evidence before her eyes was far worse than any scenario she had imagined. She stumbled backward, turning on her heels to escape, ignoring Ethan's panicked calls of her name. Her entire body trembled as she fled through the clinic's corridor, tears blurring her vision. Outside, the evening air felt suffocating. Charlotte collapsed onto a bench, gasping for breath, her stomach churning. She was pregnant with Ethan's child, yet he was standing by another woman's side for a pregnancy scan. How could everything unravel so quickly? Her world spun, the betrayal slicing through her like a knife. In that moment, Charlotte vowed she would never let herself be blindsided again. She would unearth the full truth, no matter the cost, and protect her unborn baby from this horrifying spiral of deceit. The tense standoff at Redwood Women's Center ended with Charlotte fleeing in anguish, leaving behind a stunned Ethan and a quietly triumphant Camilla. As Dr. Regina Lyons left the room to deal with the unexpected drama, Camilla took the opportunity to shut off the ultrasound machine's monitor. Before Ethan could gather himself, she hissed, "Don't you dare chase after her right now. We need to figure out our story." Ethan blinked in disbelief. "Our story?" he repeated. He felt his heart rate skyrocket. Charlotte had just discovered the worst betrayal imaginable, and Camilla's primary concern was damage control. "Yes," Camilla said firmly, swinging her legs off the exam table. "This is about protecting our child. She needs to know we didn't plan this, that it just happened." Her performance was seamless, tears filling her eyes as her voice quavered, yet her manipulative edge peeked through, like a cat with one paw over a caged bird. Ethan felt a surge of anger. He had deceived Charlotte, but now it struck him that he might also be a victim of Camilla's deceit. Over the next few days, seeds of doubt germinated. He recalled how precise Camilla's prenatal updates always seemed, and how evasive she was when he asked to accompany her to appointments. But each time Ethan considered pressing her for real proof, shame paralyzed him. After all, if she was truly pregnant, he couldn't abandon her without turning into the worst kind of villain. Back at home, Charlotte barricaded herself in the guest bedroom, refusing to speak to Ethan. She ignored his tearful apologies and pleas for a conversation. Instead, she reached out to her friend Sarah and confided in her mother, Linda Green, who lived in Boston. Linda, stunned by the revelations, urged Charlotte to protect her mental health and her unborn child's well-being. "Consider coming home to Boston," her mother offered. "We'll take care of you, sweet girl. You don't need to face this alone." Charlotte thanked her mother for the support, but wasn't ready to flee Redwood City just yet. She wanted answers. She wanted to stand her ground, for once not succumbing to a meek acceptance of male betrayal. Taking matters into her own hands, Charlotte hired a private investigator named Maria Thompson, someone Sarah had recommended. Maria was a former law enforcement officer known for her discretion and thoroughness. "Find out everything you can about Camilla Brooks," Charlotte insisted. "I need to know who she is, where she came from, and if she's really pregnant." Days blurred into nights as Charlotte oscillated between heartbreak and fierce determination. She avoided Ethan, speaking only when necessary, while he slept in a makeshift arrangement on the living room couch. The hush between them was oppressive, punctured occasionally by Charlotte's suppressed sobs or Ethan's murmured phone calls to an unknown contact. Meanwhile, Maria Thompson's investigation advanced at a rapid clip. Through medical records cross-checks, social media scrutiny, and an inside source at Redwood Women's Center, Maria pieced together an alarming picture. Camilla had been secretly colluding with Lisa Miller, a clerk at the clinic, to falsify pregnancy documents. The ultrasound images Camilla presented to Ethan were either stock photos from a medical website or manipulated scans from unsuspecting pregnant women who visited the clinic. When Maria laid out her findings in Charlotte's kitchen, Charlotte's eyes brimmed with both fury and relief. "So, she's not pregnant at all?" Charlotte asked, voice trembling. Maria shook her head decisively. "Based on everything we've found, there's no legitimate medical record confirming Camilla Brooks is carrying a child. Every piece of evidence points to fraud." Charlotte stared at the stack of documents with numb astonishment. This woman had invaded her marriage, threatened her future, and nearly ruined everything. Now Charlotte grasped the full gravity. Camilla was a con artist with no compunction about deceiving them all. Clutching the evidence, Charlotte felt a wave of righteous anger. She had to expose Camilla and see to it that Ethan confronted his wrongdoing once and for all. In that moment, Charlotte resolved to step out of her role as the injured victim. She would pull back the curtain on Camilla's lies, clear any doubt about the mistress's so-called pregnancy, and force Ethan to choose where his loyalty truly lay. The storm of betrayal was still raging, but Charlotte finally held a lantern to guide her through the darkness truth. With Maria Thompson's revelations in hand, Charlotte decided the time had come to confront Camilla and force Ethan to watch the carefully constructed lie crumble. She contacted Jacob Hill, who had begun to suspect something was terribly amiss. Although Ethan had never fully confided in him, the tension in the office and the rumors swirling about Camilla's abrupt shifts in behavior hinted at something major brewing behind the scenes. Charlotte arranged a meeting at Harrison Global Ventures conference room after hours to ensure there would be privacy. She asked Jacob to be present as a witness and also insisted on the presence of Harrison Global's corporate lawyer, William Carter. Though none of the parties quite knew what to expect, Charlotte's unwavering calm hinted she had something explosive to reveal. Camilla arrived under the assumption that Ethan was finally ready to discuss future financial support. Wearing a sharp blazer and heels, she carried herself with confidence, her dark hair falling in impeccably styled waves. She didn't expect to find Charlotte, Jacob, and William waiting at the long, polished table. Confusion flickered across her face, then morphed into a practiced mask of concern. "Ethan?" she said, casting him a questioning look as he stood near the head of the table. "Please, sit," Charlotte said coolly, gesturing to a chair opposite her. Camilla hesitated, sensing the gravity of the situation. Ethan seemed tense, his brow furrowed, but he remained silent. Once Camilla was seated, Charlotte slid a folder across the table. "These are documents," she began, voice measured, "proving you faked your pregnancy. I have sworn statements from the clinic staff, as well as evidence of your transactions with Lisa Miller. The ultrasound images you showed Ethan are fraudulent." Camilla's eyes widened in feigned outrage. "How dare you accuse me of something so vile?" she snapped, but there was a quiver in her voice. "Ethan, you know this is nonsense. We've been to the doctor. We have been to a doctor," Ethan cut in, voice low. "But I noticed the clinic never kept consistent records, and you always insisted on controlling the visits. Charlotte has enough proof to discredit your entire story." Jacob, folding his arms, added, "We can handle this quietly, or we can file charges for fraud and extortion." His voice was cold. "If you're truly pregnant, you should have nothing to hide. A legitimate doctor could clear this up in minutes. But it seems you've been dancing around any real verification." Panic flared in Camilla's eyes as she realized the trap she was in. William Carter, the company's lawyer, spoke up next. "We have statements suggesting you demanded money under false pretenses. If the matter goes to court, the consequences for you both criminally and financially could be severe. My client, Ethan Harrison, has made numerous payments to support a pregnancy that, based on this evidence, does not exist." Camilla's confident demeanor cracked. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a possible exit. "All right," she spat, "so maybe I manipulated the timeline. But you can't prove I'm not pregnant, not conclusively. Maybe I just had a miscarriage. Do you want me to provide a letter from another doctor?" But Charlotte had anticipated this evasion. "We're fully prepared to have you examined immediately by a neutral physician. If you're truly carrying Ethan's child, We'll handle the matter with respect." If not, her eyes blazed. "You'll sign a written statement admitting your fraud, and you will never contact Ethan or our family again." A tense silence descended. Camilla realized she was out of options. She glanced at Ethan, hoping for a lifeline, but his face was ashen, a mix of anger and regret. Finally, with a trembling hand, Camilla grabbed a pen and scribbled her signature on the confession William Carter slid across the table. "You'll regret this," she hissed, tears of fury welling up. "I could have gone to the tabloids, smeared your reputation," Ethan interjected, voice shaking, "but you won't. Because if you do, we'll release every piece of evidence that proves your entire scheme was fake." His shoulders sagged as he watched her storm out, a swirl of expensive perfume trailing in her wake. For a long moment, no one spoke. The adrenaline in the room was palpable. Charlotte closed the folder of documents, meeting Ethan's gaze for the first time in what felt like forever. He looked hollow, as though the entire confrontation had torn him open. Jacob placed a supportive hand on Ethan's shoulder, then quietly excused himself with William, leaving husband and wife alone. The monstrous lie was finally dragged into the light, but the scars it left behind might never fully fade. When the door closed behind Jacob and William, an echo seemed to reverberate through the large conference room. Ethan and Charlotte stood facing each other across the polished table, the silence punctuated only by the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Outside, Redwood City was bathed in twilight, the skyline alight with shimmering windows, but within this room, the emotional darkness was almost tangible. Ethan spoke first. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling with remorse. "I know that word doesn't begin to repair the damage I've done. Charlotte, I never intended for any of this to happen." She regarded him with a mixture of heartbreak and anger. Her eyes held tears she refused to let fall. "You lied to me. You betrayed me, and you let another woman nearly destroy our family," she replied, her voice quivering yet resolute. "Was our marriage so disposable to you?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, at a loss for words to defend himself. Finally he managed, "It was never about love with Camilla. I got caught up in a stupid, selfish moment of weakness, and then the lies kept compounding. Before I knew it, I was stuck and terrified of losing you." Charlotte pressed a hand to her abdomen, feeling the faint flutter that reminded her she carried a child in this world of chaos. "Well, you may have lost me anyway," she said, voice cracking. "How can I trust you again, Ethan? How can I believe a single promise you make?" Desperation flickered across his features. "Let me earn it back," he pleaded. "I'm willing to do anything, counseling, therapy, talking to our pastor, anything. I just can't bear the thought of losing you and our baby." She wiped at her eyes, remembering the first time she and Ethan had talked about having children, how his entire face lit up at the prospect. It wasn't easy to reconcile that memory with the man who had just hidden an affair and a false pregnancy from her. "This isn't something that can be fixed overnight," she whispered. "You've shattered my faith in you. But I won't make any decisions right now. For the sake of our child, I'll at least consider letting you prove yourself." They left the conference room like two strangers, each weighed down by heartbreak, regret, and the faintest glimmer of hope. In the following days, Ethan relocated to a spare bedroom in their lavish home, honoring Charlotte's request for emotional distance while they figured out the next step. He cut off all contact with Camilla, blocking her number and instructing his assistants to refuse her calls. Any attempt on her part to stir more chaos could be dealt with through the legal system. Meanwhile, Charlotte began seeing a therapist on her own to cope with the betrayal. She also continued her prenatal checkups with Dr. Helena Morris, who remarked that Charlotte's stress levels could affect the baby. "Put your well-being first," Dr. Morris gently advised. "The rest will follow." On the nights Charlotte cried herself to sleep, she reminded herself that she was not just grieving for a betrayed marriage, but also for the ideal of a perfect family she had desperately wanted for her child. She wavered between anger that threatened to consume her and a fragile longing for the love they once shared. Despite the suffocating tension, small rays of warmth emerged. Ethan would leave a note by her breakfast plate, expressing remorse and a promise to fight for their marriage. He began scheduling sessions with a renowned marriage counselor, Dr. Naomi Drake, who specialized in guiding couples through infidelity. When Charlotte reluctantly agreed to attend, he expressed quiet gratitude, as though it was the first sign of forgiveness she'd offered. Even so, Charlotte knew the path to healing would be long and fraught with pitfalls. Yes, Camilla Brooks had been exposed, but the deeper wound the lie Ethan had chosen to live would not vanish with a few heartfelt apologies. Would their unborn child be enough of a bridge to mend their shattered vows? Or would the final cost of Ethan's betrayal prove too great for either of them to bear? Ethan and Charlotte began the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding their marriage, if such a thing was possible, under the guidance of Dr. Naomi Drake. Their first few counseling sessions were brutal. Charlotte unleashed the full force of her hurt and rage, detailing how each lie and secrecy chipped away at her sense of security. Ethan, often teary-eyed and remorseful, struggled to explain why he let himself fall into Camilla's trap. They examined every angle: Ethan's mounting stress from his corporate responsibilities, his fear of never quite meeting the standards he set for himself, and how he allowed momentary temptation to unravel years of trust. Charlotte, for her part, confronted the realization that she had sometimes overlooked Ethan's emotional needs, too absorbed in her own dreams to notice the cracks in his armor. None of it excused his actions, but understanding the root cause was a step forward. At home, life settled into a tense but functional rhythm. Ethan moved back into the master bedroom only after Charlotte set strict boundaries, full transparency with his phone, a promise to attend both individual and couples counseling, and unwavering support for her pregnancy. He embraced these conditions wholeheartedly, determined to demonstrate his commitment. If it meant answering her questions at 3 a.m. or reporting every text and phone call, he did so without complaint. Charlotte maintained her design practice, though she reduced her workload to safeguard her mental well-being and focus on her pregnancy. She avoided Redwood City's social scene, still uneasy about potential gossip concerning Camilla Brooks and the scandal that nearly ensued. Fortunately, with Camilla's confession filed away and a legal agreement in place, the Mistress disappeared from local headlines. Some whispered speculation lingered in the city's upper circles, but nothing stuck for long. Redwood City, always hungry for drama, soon found other scandals to devour. Despite the heartbreak, there were moments of hope. At Charlotte's next ultrasound appointment, Ethan held her hand firmly. Their baby's heartbeat, a steady, miraculous rhythm, filled the room, eliciting tears of wonder from them both. Charlotte remembered, with a pang, how different this felt compared to discovering Ethan with Camilla in a similar setting. Yet the genuine awe on Ethan's face offered a glimpse of the man she once trusted with her heart. As the months passed, incremental acts of kindness and vulnerability began to stitch together some of the torn fabric of their relationship. Ethan developed new habits. He woke up early to make Charlotte a balanced breakfast, read books on fatherhood, and left sweet notes on her work desk, encouraging her to rest when needed. Charlotte, though guarded, found herself touched by these gestures, slowly softening her defenses. Still, healing was not a straight line. Some nights, Charlotte lashed out, triggered by a stray memory or an offhand remark about trust. They would argue, tears would spill, and old wounds felt fresh again. In those moments, Ethan's patience and reassurance were all that kept the fragile peace from shattering. Through Dr. Drake's guidance, they learned to communicate more openly about doubts, about regrets, and about small victories that gave them a reason to keep trying. Eventually, the day arrived that Charlotte never thought would come. She felt a sense of acceptance about Ethan's remorse. While she would never condone his betrayal, she began to believe that people under the right circumstances could change and grow. Approaching her 7th month of pregnancy, she felt the baby's kicks more frequently, a vivid reminder that they were building a new life within the wreckage of the old. On a balmy spring afternoon, Ethan surprised Charlotte by driving her to Redwood Park, where they had spent many of their early dates. He led her to a tranquil spot beneath a flowering magnolia tree. Kneeling carefully beside her, Ethan took her hand, voice trembling with emotion. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for your forgiveness," he said. "I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the husband and father you and our child need." Tears pooled in Charlotte's eyes. She looked at the magnolia blossoms drifting around them like soft pink snow and remembered the hopes and dreams she once shared with this man. Despite the pain, something inside her whispered that redemption was possible if they both kept working toward it. As they embraced under the gentle sun, the road ahead remained uncertain, but they chose to walk it together, hand in hand, hearts scarred but still beating for the promise of a future defined not by betrayal, but by a love tested and renewed in the crucible of adversity. In the end, Ethan and Charlotte's story stands as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of hard-won redemption. We witness betrayal at its ugliest, a mistress weaving lies so intricate that it nearly tore a devoted husband and wife apart. Yet through raw honesty, unwavering determination, and the life-affirming hope of a child on the way, they found the courage to rebuild. The path wasn't simple, nor was forgiveness guaranteed, yet step by painstaking step, they pieced together a new foundation stronger than the one before. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of emotion, betrayal, and ultimately renewal. If you found yourself captivated by the drama, the heartbreak, and the triumph of love against all odds, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life, stories that reflect the highs, lows, and courageous hope that define our shared human experience.